Morning. I should be glad when your husband gets back.
No, he left again this morning.
I know he's got one more weekend, doesn't he?
Yeah.
They said the entire month of December.
Whole month.
Fly away. I don't know. Okay. Can anybody hear this? Am I on? Am I hot? Okay. I don't hear the normal feedback. I mean, I can talk loud as it is, so. My dad was a preacher, my mom was an English teacher. I can talk all day. I can talk all day and talk loud, so.
I have so much trouble hearing what goes on. People comment, I have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it makes it awfully hard to participate.
I'll try to repeat.
Yeah.
I used to have to do that for the webcast, but now these mics actually pick up people pretty good. So I don't have to be as.
One ear, so
Yeah.
all noise goes in one ear, and so if there's any background noise, that goes in two.
Sure, it's all competing for the same
And I
spot.
tried to explain that to Mark for 50 years, and it hadn't worked.
Looks like you hear it either.
No, I mean, no fail. First thing he's going to do is sit on my bad side. We walk, he wants to walk on that side.
I'm not going to say that's intentional.
And then I turn like this.
All right, good morning. Merry Christmas a day late. Hope everybody had a decent Christmas. I had a house full, so they left this morning, and just to show you how busy we were, our two dogs were passed out when we left. They were just like, I can't do this anymore. They were dead asleep. If you're like me, I ate too much.
You're not very loud because you ain't gained control of this crowd yet.
I don't know, but it could be. It could be a crowd that just can't be gained control of at all.
There's nothing happening, I promise.
Yeah. No? If Mike can hear me. Mike can hear me, so at least something's going out over. Maybe the web can hear me better than you can. All right, he's going to turn me up. So prepare for feedback. Let's try that. Oh, that's because as much as I enjoy yelling, I don't really want to if I don't have to. So Merry Christmas a day late. Hope Santa Claus brought you everything you deserved. I got a bag of rocks and a switch and some old insulation, but I figured I was on the naughty list again this year, so hopefully everybody had a good day. Pat is still off flying over the sky somewhere today, so you got me one more week, and then Pat will be back to thankfully jump back into this chair. And I know last week, if you weren't here, I'll put it up again. I threw some kind of bad data up on the screen, and not bad in the way it's faulty, bad in the way it's not very fun. We talked about mistreatment. So we talked about James 1 last week. This week we're going to talk about James 5. But I threw this up there, and this is actually about 2 weeks old data from the Pew Research Group. And if you were here, you saw this. And it's just a couple of disturbing trends. And you can see there's 3 trends they surveyed. One is the percentage of Americans identifying as Christian. You can see 2007 all the way to basically 2 weeks ago. And you can see the trend is not favorable. Another unfavorable trend is the middle data point, and that's the number of people that identify themselves as having no religion. So that's trending up. And then the Americans who pray daily, they've only got 2 data points, 2007 and 2021. And you can see that's dropped 13 percentage points. So the trends are not what I would call favorable. if I'm doing a medical lecture, we're going to talk about the trends in the data are not favorable and what caused it, root cause analysis and all that stuff. And we actually talked about it. For those of you here, I really appreciate the conversation because it's interesting in kind of a sad way. So I thought this week I'd come with something a lot more positive. So there is a substance in your body, in our body, called laminin. And I'm not going to get too technical, but it is a glycoprotein. You don't need to know that. There's no test. But basically, laminin is the rebar of the human body. It is the substance, the protein that holds cells, tissues, organs together. You don't have laminin, you have what's known as muscular dystrophy. So laminin is vital, and it's something you've got to have. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I want you to see actually what the chemical structure looks like. Yeah. So that's what laminin looks like. Does it look like anything else you know? Look at that. And so here's an actual electron microscope picture of it. So I have a hard time looking at somebody going, tell me there's not a designer. So the thing that holds us together, the thing, if we don't have it, we don't move, is that, shaped like a cross. So I thought that was kind of cool. I saw that in a lecture, and I thought I needed to share that because it's I don't know, things like that fascinate me. I love biblical history, I love archaeology, and if I can mix in some science, it's usually a pretty good day. So we're going to talk about mistreatment again, and this time we're going to be in James 5. So if you want to go ahead and turn to James 5, we're going to cover the first 12 verses. I'll throw them up on the screen here so we can read through them. So we talked last week about when you have trials. And we did a compare and contrast of trials and temptations, where, basically temptations are kind of an inducement to sin, where trials are something that just kind of happens, of which you have no control, and you have to deal with it. So this week we're going to talk about, this is in James 5, we're going to talk about an actual physical mistreatment. So let's read it real quick and then we'll talk about it. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. Be patient, then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another. Brothers and sisters, you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth, or in any place, or in anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Okay, so what's going on in these verses? Several things, actually. But what's the mistreatment we're talking about? Because what was going on? What is he talking about here with these rich people? What were the rich people doing? They were hoarding. Basically, they owed people money for work performed, and it wasn't happening. So this is where it gets interesting, is how does this apply to today? Because I don't know about you, but my employer has not withheld money from me. Matter of fact, it has paid me faithfully every 2 weeks for the duration of my employment. So I'm not mistreated.
Yes, 4, verse 4. The wages you fail to pay the directors and move your fields, and mow your fields, and fire happiness you. And I always make sure the guys that was working for me that week got their paycheck along with it. And it just pays off, you know, so.
What do you always hear about the best bosses? The best bosses always make sure everybody else is paid before they get paid. You know, that's what you always hear, is especially in businesses, small businesses, where everybody else got paid before the boss did. Those are the places usually folks want to work. Well, I want to focus more on kind of what James is telling us what we should do about this. Because we've all been mistreated in some way, whether it be a slight or somebody's mad at you or a business deal gone bad or whatever. You know, mistreatment is in the eye of the beholder, right? We've got all kinds of definitions of mistreatment. But I wanted to talk about so he says, be patient and look for the Lord's coming. This is where it gets hard for me. Because I like instant justice, instant gratification. It's just so much easier. I want closure, right? So what was going on here? Basically, these people, the people James is writing to, this is, remember, the brother of Jesus. So the folks he's writing to were being terribly mistreated by the folks that employed them. They were withholding pay for work done, and the whole time they were living in luxury while the workers were starving. So not only did they not pay them, but they kind of rubbed it in their face, going, we're not paying you, and we know it. We're going to use that money on us, which is, I don't know, kind of a rough way to do business. But what does James do? What does James tell him to do? He says, be patient. How hard is that? How hard is it to not want to just go out and get what's yours and rectify the situation and take over, in some ways punish? You know, a lot of times you just don't want what's yours. You want a little pound of flesh or maybe a pint of blood or something in retribution. Human nature is to go get retribution, right? What does James say? He says, hang on. Be patient. I was kind of counting on that, actually. Yeah, that's not good news, because I was kind of hoping I would pick some up as I got older. And you're right, I'm finding that to not be the case. In some ways, my patience is a little thinner, and that's on me. Another thing James says is, don't grumble. Sorry, there we go. Do not grumble against each other. Turn over real quick to Philippians. I'm going to do it too. Philippians 2:14. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. Do everything without grumbling. How much trouble is that? And I also know the answer is it depends on the day. Some days I'm a little whiny. Some days I'm just like, no big deal. I'll blow it off. Let it roll. But some days I'm just like, hey, it's just not fair. You know, I can whine with the best of them, I guess, if I needed to. But this is Paul saying basically the same thing James is saying. Is don't grumble. If anything, don't, because I'm certain what was going on amongst these people that were not being paid was there is a definite difference of opinion among them on how to handle it. So there were folks that probably wanted to go get it. Some folks that wanted to just wait it out, and in between. So what James is saying is the last thing you want to do is fight amongst yourselves, because at that point you lose sight of the fact that God's in control. God's promises are reliable. Think about it. The gospel was kind of the perfect leveling field. We know that the rich will be made poor and the poor will be made rich. Right? I mean, it says it. Basically, blessed are the poor. It doesn't say blessed are the rich. Matter of fact, Jesus goes into a lot of detail about, how hard it is for rich people to actually get somewhere spiritually. Something about a camel passing through the eye of a needle. So, the gospel is now, I don't think this is essentially saying, okay, we need to be socialists and steal from one group to give to the other. That's not the same. But it is saying that you are in control of your blessings, your wealth, your holdings, and how to use them correctly. So it's really the unrighteous rich are the ones that really need to worry, right? Because if you remember, you look in the verses, it says you're being fatted to slaughter, right? What does that mean? What is James saying? Unrighteous rich. I just made that up. I wish I could take money for it, but I can't. Because what does James say when he means you're being fatted up on the day of slaughter? Because remember, he's talking to two audiences here. Audience one is the folks that are being oppressed, and audience two is the ones doing the oppressing.
Basically saying they'll get theirs.
Basically, right? They're going to get theirs. And I guess here's the take-home message number one is, who determines what theirs is? Is it us? Is it those being oppressed? Is it the folks that are doing the oppressing? Who ultimately is the judge? It's God. And I will tell you that is sometimes very hard for me to let go and let God do his thing. Because often, is it immediate? Is God's punishment? I mean, you see folks that are just so evil and so wicked and go, how are they not being slapped down? And knowing that God has promised to judge. But what my problem is I often find myself wishing I could set the timetable. It's like, God, God, you can do your thing, just can you do it this week? Or, can you get it done by New Year's? And that's just not the way it works. That's what we talked about. The rich are being prepared for slaughter. The next thing is James says, hey, you've got examples on how to deal with this. There are godly examples that you can watch. And of course he talks about prophets. And we can do a whole series of classes, I imagine, on they've started Jesus in the 3rd through 5th grade class. And the couple weeks I taught, we finished up the Old Testament minor prophets. And we were talking about people like, we were talking about Micah and Nahum. And some of these, a lot of times the folks that were involved in rebuilding Jerusalem, but their lives were never easy. And of course, James's audience would know this because that's what they would read about, right? They would find out that they would, read the prophets. They would read what happened to them. They knew the stories. And of course, the ultimate example, J-O-B, and it's not Job in this case, it's Job. There's an entire book of suffering and anguish and just, if anything bad could happen, it happened to Job. So what can we learn from folks that have suffered?
If they went through it, suffering successfully, if that is such a thing, and endured it, and they came out better in the end, that's a good example for us.
It kind of ties back what we talked about last week, which was one of the benefits, if you will, of trials is when you get through it, you're a better everything. If you handle it properly and let God work with you and through you. And that's, I think, exactly what we're talking about here. You see somebody that's been through something and they came through, we get wisdom, those of us that have done it, right? And then they become basically, I talked about heroes of the faith, of people that I knew that had been through things and fought and trusted God, and it turned out good. But there was always that sense of, I'm sure I'm glad I didn't have to do that. And then when it did happen to me, I leaned on them pretty hard. So I had those heroes to lean on. And that's what James is basically saying here is like, look, you've got Job, you've got these prophets. They didn't, many examples, a lot of unjust suffering. But yeah, really, at the end of the day, Job is the great example of, because skip to the end of the book, how did it turn out? God blessed Job greatly. And Job became one of those heroes. And so I know when James mentioned him, everybody that read that went, oh yeah. Because everybody knew Job, right? Another thing he says is basically, don't lose your cool. So this one I've where I've struggled with the verse where he says about swearing an oath. Is he talking about like don't testify? You like literally go into court and you raise your right hand and solemnly swear to tell the whole truth. Is that what he's talking about? What do you think he's talking about? The more I read it, the more I'm getting away from that. But what is he talking about?
You're trying to swear that you're going to do something. You can't do nothing.
So basically, it's what we call an empty promise, or a veiled empty threat.
When you speak, people realize that's not going to change.
I think it goes back to what you said about patience. Do not lose your cool. We need to try to take care of it yourself and not let God handle it. We lose our cool when we're trying to take care of it. But we can in a lot of cases.
Oh, I agree.
It's not mendable by us.
It's one of those situations where, yeah, if I rely on me and my emotions and my, I may be really calm and cool for the first part of it, but then eventually I'm going to get frustrated, I'm going to get irritated, I'm going to get angry, and then human nature is going to kick in. Whereas God doesn't do that. So he keeps saying the message that James is just hammering home and hammering home and hammering home is keep your composure. It will all work out. How hard is that? How hard is it to wait for God to do something? I know, rhetorical question. Because anybody's going to say, oh, it's easy.
Well, it depends on your state of mind.
Which we kind of talked about last week as far as, God says it's coming. You kind of prepare yourself for it by becoming a better Christian, reading, studying, praying. So when it does happen, it's not quite the slap in the head that it could be. And I think that's you're right, that kind of ties back to the whole part about expecting trials and being ready for it when it does hit, because that's an issue that it's not if, it's when, right? I mean, that's one of the things that if you really sat down and thought about it, it's kind of, I don't know, kind of depressing in a way. That's like you're going to have trouble. It's not if, it's when. It's just what's it going to be and when's it going to be, which is, if I sit down and think about it long enough, I don't know if I like that, because I think it all should be just rainbows and unicorns. As a matter of fact, my daughters, years ago, for Boss's Day, told my staff that I like to say rainbows and unicorns a lot. It's just rainbows and unicorns. So my entire office was decorated with rainbows and unicorns. And I left that stuff up for like 3 months, because I'd like to think that everything's rainbows and unicorns, and like I tell my kids, though, really it's that's called heaven. Rainbows and unicorns, that's called heaven. So that's something to try to get to. So James's final take-home message in all this is God's going to provide the justice. And it's not maybe, it's not probably, it is God will do what he said he's going to do. Which in some ways I think is really reassuring. I mean, since when has God said something that he didn't do? So if God says he's going to do it, then why would he just pick this one thing to not do, right? So that's really reassuring that he says he's going to do it, we're going to trust him to do it. But it's also, again, it goes back to that human nature where you wish it'd go a little faster. Because God's timing is not always our timing. And that's, I struggle with that some days better than others. But I know that, if God says he's going to do it, then he's going to do it. All right, so we have 10 minutes. So I knew I'd probably finish a little early because I wanted to wrap it up. I didn't want to leave a cliffhanger in time for Pat to come back and go a totally different direction. That would be cruel. But I also want to leave time for any comments. Sir?
I think sometimes we forget when we're thinking about someone that's done us wrong and waiting for the justice, and it's not on our time frame. We forget God's going to judge us too. He's going to judge not just the ones that have done it. He's going to judge everybody.
That's easy to forget too, for me. It's like, yeah, not only is he going to judge what happened to me, he's going to judge how I react to it and what I do in response. Because it's so easy just to play a victim and go, well, I was wronged, so that justifies anything I do at this point. And you're absolutely not the case. It's not. So here's just kind of, the past 2 weeks just kind of sums it up in one slide. Christians are often subjected to difficulties and trials. That's clear. It's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And I wish I could say,
Well, everybody is, it's just that we have the advantage of being able to deal with it through our Father. Giving Him the load.
I ask myself this question all the time because I see it, in healthcare with really catastrophic events. And how do people handle that when they don't have God? Because it's hard enough when you do have God. So I've always understood is how, the key phrase, the key take-home is they don't. It literally ruins them because they've got nowhere to go to. And James is not telling people to look for trouble, but rather have the right attitude when it happens. That's something that we can prepare for. It's nice to have, you can't prepare for a specific event, but you can prepare for how you react when something does happen. So it's a very global, 10,000-foot level preparation. And it involves reading and praying and gleaning the wisdom of some very godly people. There's a lot of people in this room that, I love picking their brains. Attitudes reveal our hearts to others as well as to ourselves. And that goes back to exactly what you said. How we react to trials and how we react to those that have wronged us say way more about us than it does about them. Way more.
And something that happens, let's just say the first time, and it bugs you that you didn't handle it right, you grow from that experience too.
Because that's never happened to me. Oh, it happens to me all the time. I'm not even going to act like I. How many times have I handled something I really wish I could do that over? And you don't get do-overs a lot of times, and it's very difficult. Yes, sir.
I remember hearing on the radio this guy in California had a flat. He said he got out and took a gun and shot the other 3 tires out.
Yeah.
Bad deal.
It's what did they say? Pain is optional, or pain is inevitable, misery is optional. That's a great saying, and it's all fine and dandy until you hurt. And then it's like, well, I understand where the misery comes from. The world we live in is full of problems, some of our own making and some not. How is that? How true is that? And I guess my question is, what's the ratio of ones that I've created and ones that have happened to me? And I wonder, I probably don't really want to know that number. I bet the ones I've created are way more than the ones that happened to me, whether it be omission or commission or ignorance or worse, a little bit of I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. A little bit full of myself, where I think I know better. A little bit hubris.
Which one affects your emotions the most? The one you create, or what else creates?
That's a good question. Because I could argue for both.
I don't want to blame myself.
And usually it's the exact same situation, right? Yeah.
I don't like to blame myself, but that's where the blame ought to go.
That's really where the blame should go, shouldn't it? Especially if we were the ones that created the problem and then it was compounded by somebody else. Well, it's just easier to deflect everything on that other person, including the fact that you basically set this up to start with. So, yeah. It's so much easier just to assign blame, isn't it? I know for me. And it's like, it was stolen, it was broken. Well, yeah, you left it laying on the sidewalk, or you left your car unlocked in downtown Austin. But yet, it's, you created the situation where there's a bad outcome. And then finally, a child of God needs to be prepared to properly deal with trials, tribulations, and even persecution. Because remember, the audience James is talking to is there's some persecution going on. So, to me, persecution is way milder than what they went through. Yes, ma'am.
We know that we are going to have things happen. It's going to throw us for a loop. I've had plenty of them in my life. But as long as we realize that what we have is worth more than all the gold and silver in the world, and as long as we keep that in mind and have faith in our God that no matter what, He's going to bring a good conclusion. We may not know it, we may not recognize it even when it happens.
Hmm.
But when we look back over our lives, and I'm speaking for myself, we can see where all of these trials and tribulations have brought us to where we are now. So we have to remember, God is in control, and He is going to help those who love Him and bring it to an ultimate good end.
And I think that's, yes, ma'am.
Well, and like Tim told me a few weeks ago, that, and reminded me really, because I knew it, that that's the way things are here in this world, in this life. And it should make us look even more forward to being in heaven, as things strong, just being in heaven with God, because that's not going to happen anymore.
And I think that really ties into what James is saying. I think that's why he's saying be patient, let God handle it, because guess what? At the end of the day, we're going to get through it. Now, getting through it may be our reward in heaven, but that's okay with me too. I can't improve on that. I'm not going to. I guess the bottom line is we know if the stuff's going to happen. We've got a path to help us. Because I know, I look back and honestly, whether it be professional life, spiritual life, any leadership I've learned, I have people whose voices in my head I hear. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was hearing was what I needed to hear. And sometimes it was painful. I was told by my boss years ago, I was up for a director position at a sister hospital, and he goes, I told them you weren't ready. And that stung, because I thought I was. He turned out to be 120% right. I wasn't ready. Not till years later. And I still remember that. This has been going on 20 years, and I remember that. And I won't even talk about some of the spiritual people that have molded me and shaped me, and so I saw things, whether they be the right way to do things or maybe the not quite so right way to do things. I've learned both of those. And so I think James is really saying stop and listen and trust God. We got 2 minutes. Anything else? I appreciate you letting me teach the last few weeks. I enjoyed it. Like I said, this is way more nerve-wracking than I take that back. The 3rd through 5th graders are way more nerve-wracking because they ask a lot of questions. and you don't want to get it wrong because they are so adorable. But I appreciate your time, and like I said,
They're sponges.
they are. And I got to be careful, even just thinking out loud. They like write it down. Yeah. So I have to be careful. So Pat will be back next week, Lord willing, in case he just can't get out of his flying. But I think he gets back to semi-normal schedule. So I appreciate your attention, and thank you very much. And we're done. Thank you.